He twined my hair into a rope and lifted it off my shoulders so that he could the better kiss the downy furrows below my ears that made me shudder. And he kissed those blazing rubies too. He kissed them before he kissed my mouth. Rapt, he intoned. Off her apparel she retains only her sonorous jewelry. A dozen husbands impaled a dozen brides, while the meowing gulls swung on invisible trapezes in the empty air outside. I was brought to my senses by the insistent shrilling of the telephone. He lay beside me, felled like an oak, breathing stertorously, as if he had been fighting with me. In the course of that one-sided flung against a wall. I had heard him shriek and blaspheme at the orgasm. I had bled, and perhaps I had seen his face without its mask, and perhaps I had not. Yet I had been infinitely dishevelled by the loss of my virginity. I gathered myself together, reached into the cloisonné cupboard beside the bed that concealed the telephone, and addressed the mouthpiece. His agent in New York. Urgent. I shook him awake and rolled over on my side, cradling my spent body in my arms. His voice buzzed like a hive of distant bees. My husband. My husband who, with so much love, filled my bedroom with lilies until it looked like an embalming parlour. Those somnolent lilies that wave their heavy heads, distributing their lush, insolent incense reminiscent of pampered flesh. When he'd finished with the agent, he turned to me and stroked the ruby necklace that bit into my neck, but with such tenderness now that I ceased flinching and he caressed my breast. My dear one, my little love, my child, did it hurt her? He's so sorry for it, such impetuousness. He could not help himself, you see. He loves her so, and this lover's recitative of his brought my tears into a flood. I clung to him as though only the one who had inflicted the pain could comfort me for suffering it. For a while he murmured to me in a voice I'd never heard before, a voice like the soft consultations of the sea. But then he unwound the tendrils of my hair from the buttons of his smoking jacket, kissed my cheek briskly, and told me the agent from New York had called with such urgent business that he must leave as soon as the tide was low enough. Leave the castle, leave France, and would be away for at least 6 weeks. But it is our honeymoon. A deal, an enterprise of hazard and chance involving several millions. Into that waxwork stillness of his. I was only a little girl. I did not understand. And, he said, unspoken to my wounded vanity, I have had too many honeymoons to find them in the least pressing commitments. I know quite well that this child I've brought with a handful of coloured stones and the pelts of dead beasts won't run away. But after he'd called his Paris agent to book a passage for the States next day, just one tiny call, my little one, we should have time for dinner together. And I had to be content with that. A Mexican dish of pheasant with hazelnuts and chocolate, salad, white voluptuous cheese, a sorbet of Muscat grapes and asti spumant. A celebration of Krug exploded festively. And then acrid black coffee in precious little cups, so fine it shadowed the birds with which they were painted. I had Cointreau, he had cognac in the library, with the purple velvet curtains drawn against the night, where he took me to perch on his knee in a leather armchair beside the flickering log fire. He had me change into that chaste little Poiret shift of white muslin. He seemed especially fond of it, My breasts showed through the flimsy stuff, he said, like little soft white doves that sleep, each one with a pink eye open. But he would not let me take off my ruby choker, although it was growing very uncomfortable, nor fasten up my descending hair, the sign of a virginity so recently ruptured that still remained a wounded presence between us. He twined his fingers in my hair until I winced. I said, I remember very little. The maid will have changed our sheets already, he said. We do not hang the bloody sheets out of the window to prove to the whole of Brittany that you are a virgin, not in these civilized times, but I should tell you, it would have been the first time in all my married lives I could have shown my interested tenants such a flag. Then I realized with a shock of surprise how it must have been my innocence that captivated him. The silent music, he said, of my unknowingness, like La Terrasse des Audiences. You must remember how ill at ease I was in that luxurious place, how unease had been my constant companion during the whole length of my courtship by this grave satyr, who now gently martyrized my hair. To know that my naivety gave him some pleasure made me take heart. Courage! I shall act the fine lady to the manner born one day, if only by virtue of default. Then, slowly yet teasingly, as if he were giving a child a great mysterious treat, he took out a bunch of keys from some interior hidey-hole in his jacket. Key after key, a key, he said, for every lock in the house. Keys of all kinds, huge ancient things of black iron, others slender, delicate, almost baroque, wafer-thin Yale keys for safes and boxes. And during his absence it was I who must take care of them all. I eyed the heavy bunch with circumspection. Until that moment I had not given a single thought to the practical aspects of marriage, with a great house, great wealth, a great order. Here were the clumsy and archaic keys for the dungeons, cellars for his wines, the dusty bottles inhabited in racks, all those deep holes of pain in the rock on which the castle was built. These are the keys to the kitchens. This is the key to the picture gallery, a treasure house filled by 5 centuries of avid collectors. Ah, he foresaw I would spend hours there. He had amply indulged his taste for the symbolists. He told me with a glint of greed. There was Moreau's great portrait of his first wife, the famous sacrificial victim, with the imprint of the lace-like chains on her pellucid skin. Did I know the story of the painting of that picture? How, when she took off her clothes for him for the first time, she fresh from her bar in Montmartre, she had robed herself voluntarily in a blush that reddened her breasts, her shoulders, her arms, her whole body. He had thought of that story, of that dear girl, when first he had undressed me. Ensor, the great Ensor, his 2 or 3 late Gorgans, his special favourite, the one of the tranced brown girl in the deserted house which was called Out of the Night We Come, Into the Night We Go. And besides, the additions he had made himself, his marvellous inheritance of Watteaus, Poussins, and a pair of very special fragonards, commissioned for a licentious ancestor, who, it was said, had posed for the master's brush himself with his own 2 daughters. He broke off his catalogue of treasures abruptly. Your thin white face, chérie, he said, as if he saw it for the first time. Your thin white face, with its promise of debaucherie, only a connoisseur could detect. A log fell in the fire, instigating a shower of sparks. The opal on my finger spurted green flame. I felt as giddy as if I were on the edge of a precipice. I was afraid, not so much of him, of his monstrous presence, heavy as if he had been gifted at birth with more specific gravity than the rest. Most in love with him, always subtly oppressed me. Of myself, I seemed reborn in his unreflected eyes, reborn in unfamiliar shapes. I hardly recognized myself from his descriptions of me, and yet, might there not be a grain of beastly truth in them? And in the red firelight I blushed again, unnoticed, to think he might have chosen me because, in my innocence, he sensed a rare talent for corruption. Here is the key to the china cabinet. Don't laugh, my darling. There's a king's ransom in Sèvres in that closet, and a queen's ransom in Limoges, and a key to the locked, barred room where 5 generations of plate were kept. Keys, keys, keys. He would trust me with the keys to his office, although I was only a baby, and the keys to his safes, where he kept the jewels I should wear, he promised me, when we returned to Paris. Such jewels! Why, I would be able to change my earrings and necklaces 3 times a day, just as the emperor. You doubted, he said, with that hollow knocking sound that served him for a chuckle, I would be quite so interested in his share certificates, although they, of course, were worth infinitely more. Outside our firelit privacy, I could hear the sound of the tide drawing back from the pebbles of the foreshore. It was nearly time for him to leave me. One single key remained unaccounted for on the ring, and he hesitated over it. For a moment, I thought he was going to unfasten it from its brothers, slip it back into his pocket, and take it away with him. "What is that key?" I demanded, for his chaffing had made me bold. "The key to your heart. Give it me." He dangled the key tantalizingly above my head, out of reach of my straining fingers. Those bare red lips of his cracked sidelong in a smile. "Ah, no," he said, "not the key to my heart, rather the key to my enfer." He left it on the ring, fastened the ring together, shook it musically, like a carillon, then threw the keys, cold metal chilling my thighs through the thin muslin frock. He bent over me to drop a beard-masked kiss on my forehead. "Every man must have one secret, if only one, from his wife," he said. "Promise me this, my whey-faced piano player. Promise me you'll use all the keys on the ring except that last little one I showed you. Play with anything you find, jewels, silver plate, make toy boats of my share certificates, if it pleases you, and send them sailing off to America after me. All is yours, everywhere is open to you, except the lock that this single key fits."